Donny has never had the talk. You guys had the talk, right?
Absolutely, bro.
Everybody's heard of the what? Brian,
My parents didn't have the talk with me.
Really?
Thank you, brother.
No,
Okay.
I found out the hard way when I was 9 years old.
How'd you find out?
My father drove a nice car. I was sitting on the back of the car. Culver City police drove by, shining the light at me. I sarcastically said to them, "So you think I'm trying to steal this car?" Mm-hmm. And 5 seconds later, there was a 9mm gun pressed against my face.
Wow.
But I learned the hard way. But it's a beautiful thing that it happened the way that it did because it taught me for the rest of my life.
Right.
It's also beautiful that my father didn't see that happening.
Wow. Wow. Stinson, when you hear stories like that, as a retired LAPD officer, when you hear stories like that, what goes through your head?
It's horrific. I mean, there is a way to do policing without escalating a situation to where you're putting a gun to a young person's head.
Yes.
It's uncalled for. It's not part of how we train. The situation did not warrant that. Mm-hmm. It was just a simple consensual encounter. How you doing, young man? Is this your vehicle? If he had to ask anything, but he should have been asking, saying, "Hey, is everything okay?
Right.
Is there anything I can do for you?" There should be a mindset that when people see police officers, they know that we can be trusted and that we're actually there to help and not harm. Unfortunately, that narrative has been changed here in the last decade or so with the turn of events in this country.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. It's not supposed to be about intimidation.
Well, let me say this.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna tell you why I couldn't stand the police when I was a little kid. We was going to the 49-cent show in Culver City. It's called the 49-cent show. So we was riding our bikes up Adams, and we was going to the 49-cent show. Culver City is some of the racist police ever.
Right.
They took us and beat us on our knees and said, "Nigger boys, get back across Adams." You know what I'm saying? That was my first encounter with the police. And so I couldn't stand them ever since I was 9 years old. And so every time I see the police, I'll be like, can't stand y'all. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm just being real.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, real.
And every time I see the police, I get uptight.
Mike, I'm a civil rights lawyer for 40
Donny.
years. Donny, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
40 years.
Right.
And I have a son. And I did have the talk because in Los Angeles, I'm from 109th and Dinker. And in Los Angeles, you had to have the talk at least with your young son so that they know. Show your hands. Yes, sir. No, sir. And I told my son, your main job, if the cop stops you, is to get through it and get home and tell me about it.
Right.
I'll take care of it to get home. Just get through it and tell me about it, and we'll deal with it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, you are a civil rights, you're an attorney, and you know how to deal with it. But most people from the ghetto, we think they we think they're more superior than us.
And brother,
you get what I'm saying?
that's why I love show like this, Donny, and other shows to educate the people that there are things that we need to know to make it better for all of us.
Right. But that's why it's about the education. That's why we have, like you said, to have these shows. That's why it's important to actually have that talk. And if you haven't had that talk with your kid, maybe it is important for you to have that talk because you've had the interaction with the police. You've talked to the policemen and gotten tips maybe from them on how to better interact with them or whatever so that your kids can come home safely.
I understand that. I'm not saying all policemen are bad.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, I'm telling you, my first encounter with the police, that was a bad experience for me and all my partners. You know what I'm saying? And I never did trust the police after that.
Well, I look at it like that experience might have saved my life because I had to learn, because the police would come to the school. I was 9 years old, and they were very friendly and very kind, and I was left with the impression that they were my friend. I was a little annoyed at this particular situation, but I learned that you can't mouth off to them. Experiences like that may save your life because as you get older, they're more and more likely to see you as more of a threat. So something that seems bad on the outside can ultimately be a life-saving thing. It might have been for you.
This is interesting, Brian, because between you and Donny, all right, so something happened to you when you were a kid. You had a 9mm put to your head at 9 years old.
It was more than that, but we don't have to go into it. But still, the gun, I remember the gun.
Yes. All right, so you had a gun put to your head at 9 years old. Donny was beaten by police. He still has this animosity towards the police after all these years. You're obviously an attorney and you've had to work, so what made you see them in a different light?
Because I know that they're not all bad. And I know that the way that we have been trained to look at law enforcement as the enemy misses the issue in a way. I mean, I've had over 200 clients that I've represented, mostly death cases, mostly shooting cases. And I went into it thinking that these are racist cops, and they're operating on the basis of racism. But as the years turned into decades, and as the decades started stacking of doing this, I realized it's more of a fear-based response. And I also realized that a lot of these guys, despite all the hubris and all the bravado, they feel horrible about what they did.
You think so? You answer that, Stinson.
I think he hit the nail on the head on that one. What people don't understand is what they fear.
Right.
And oftentimes you get officers who come to a marginalized community who have no stake in the community,
right.
They haven't invested in anything, they don't have parents who grew up there, anything of that nature, so they don't feel a connection.
Right.
I love the words by Dr. Cornel West, who says, you can't serve the people unless you love them. So love is the key. I was fortunate because I was a drill instructor for 8 years for LAPD. I trained close to 400 police officers. And I always drove home to them is that you got to treat that community as if you in your own block.
Amen.
Because if you treat it that way, you're going to do everything that you can do to make sure you do the job right, and not have question or be questioned about your behavior out in the field, particularly when you're not in the view of your supervisor. See, and so for me, coming from Lansing, Michigan, to LA in my 20s, and my dream was to be either an attorney or a police officer. I chose law enforcement because when I got that book of torts and saw how thick it was, this is not for me.
Right.
That being said, though, what actually inspired me, because I did go to high school with Magic Johnson, one of the greatest basketball players ever that's played the game, in my opinion.
Yes.
It was two officers. One was a police officer, one was a fireman, the McGee brothers. They both were always sharp. They always had nice cars, and they were very polite brothers. I went to school with their twin sisters, and I saw it, I said, man, you know, I think when I grow up, I want to be a police officer. In life, when you have a dream and vision, you follow it all the way through. I have no regrets for my 30 years of service to the community, because I would challenge anybody here in the sound of my voice right now to say that I was anything but a community cop.
You're a good one. All right, once again, some good cops out there. You can give them a round of applause because, like you said, Donny, it's some good cops out there.
Let me say this.
Go ahead.
I believe this brother is probably a good cop, but most of the cops, like he said when we was talking about this a few weeks ago, they come from Simi Valley, they come from other neighborhoods, and they come police our neighborhoods, and they don't give a hell about us.
And
you know what I'm
that's
saying?
the problem, man. In California, you can't require that someone live in the city where they patrol. So the problem is they don't have that connection, that sense of humanity. They may patrol in South Central, but then at the end of the shift, get in their cars and go to Simi Valley. So that's a problem. If they're in the cars and not walking around the community, they can't get that connection. I talk with my hands. When I'm excited, I'm going off and using my hands. Brothers that know me know I'm just using my hands. But if you don't know me, okay, if you think that I'm somebody else, another world, that connection is missing. And that's what leads to the Sandra Bryans and the Flannery Castillos. And what Brian said is true. The cops are fearful. Fear is what really powers some of these wrongful shootings, because every officer can give you a story of a traffic stop that turns deadly. Every officer.
But it is incredibly rare. And statistically, it's incredibly rare.
We're also scared too. When we get pulled over.
Correct.
That's their job. Your job, I understand, look, I got much respect for police officers. I have a cousin who's a police officer. I fear for her like every day when she's patrolling the streets in New York. But it's her job. It's what she signed up for. It is what you pledge. When you go through, you're a training instructor. He said something very, very, I think this is very smart, right? You basically said you are supposed to treat those neighborhoods like they're your own. You teach that.
Yes, sir.
You teach that. Why can't they remember that when they go into these communities? And why, the main reason why we're so pissed off, because they're not being held accountable when they mess up.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, no,
I felt like
you're absolutely right.
Yes. But one of the things that we have to also talk about is there's a culture at work. And believe it or not, regardless of the race of the officers, regardless of what community they go home to, they're going to take their cue from those that are above them. They're going to take their cue from the watch commander. They're going to take their cue from just the locker room culture. And how they view this is going to be determined by the leadership. We have seen a lot of different LAPDs, for example, in the last 3 or 4 decades. There is no reason to not believe that if they live in Simi Valley, they can't be compassionate and respectful to someone that lives in South Central. The reality is, a lot of times, their behavior is condoned by their watch commander. Because really, it's police that have the power to control the police more than anyone.
Yeah.
And by the code of silence.
The blue.
There is a code of silence that is terribly destructive to all of our communities, not just the black communities, to the brown communities, to the white communities, okay? This code that says because we are cops, because we are reliant on each other to come in times of danger and need, I'm not gonna snitch on you if I see you do something wrong.
Right.
I have been doing this 40 years. I can count on one hand the number of times a cop has said, you know, Mr. Douglas, I did see that person use too much force. I did do something wrong. There is this mentality of circling the wagons and protecting each other because folks are afraid to come forward and to report excessive force. Though every police officer in California is duty sworn to do that, and that's the real problem.
Why, Stinson? Why is there more of a concern about the blue than the black or the white?
Well, it was, like was said earlier, it's a culture. And nothing trumps the culture because at the end of the day, everybody has got to be able to stick together. You're going to keep your story the same. And sometimes you're not even there when it happens.
But right is right, right?
Right is right.
Right.
When you get there,
That's a very important point.
And when you get there, it's like what happened. You don't question it. Well, let me offer this to you.
That's wrong.
It is wrong.
How do you make it better, brother? How do you make it better?
This is how you make it better. One of my classmates, who is now currently a chief of police way out of somewhere in Timbuktu, won't even call his name. We had an arrestee in the back of our car from Jordan Downs. We pull up to Southeast Station on 108th and Broadway. We get to the back. He says, "You dumbass nigger." The brother's handcuffed, looks at me like, "Man, so what color are you?" He didn't have to say nothing else. I said, "Sit right here. Don't move." I walked 10 steps from that patrol car, and I had words to that guy. And I said, "Don't you ever dishonor this badge,
Amen.
the oath that we have taken." I said, because the next time I ever hear you use that word, it's you and I. It's going to be you and me. Now, I got marked from that because now it's the locker room. He goes in the locker room, "Hey, you got to watch Brown, man. He's got a short fuse." You know, he's telling. But guess what?
Snitch.
I have honor.
Right.
Right.
And my integrity and honor is more important than trying to keep up with a culture of trying to be the guy that goes with everybody else. I'm not a follower. I'm a leader.
You did it right.
And let me say this, like, not you, but some of them they had their gangs. You know what I mean? In the county jail, they had one called the Goon Squad.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? And they would, you know, guys that come in and they'd beat the dog crap out of you. You know what I'm saying? For doing a little bit of nothing if they didn't like you. Dudes with 4'10" got high heels on because, you know, they some punks.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And those goon squads in those county jails, man, are terrible. They beat up on blacks and they beat up on Mexicans.
But there's security.
You know what I'm talking
This
about?
is going on, and they allow it to happen.
There is a culture,
Yes.
particularly in the county sheriffs of Los Angeles,
Right.
of gangs and khakis.
That's right.
It's been going on for decades.
Been going on since the 70s and the 80s, all over different stations. There are cases all the time at county jail, the 3,000 boys on a certain level of the county jail. And they are just like the gangs with gang signs, initiations, tattoos on their ankles. It is dangerous, folks. We have to do something about it.
Yep, that's what we're here for, because we know there's a problem. So how do you solve problems? With knowledge. So we're going to give people
Absolutely.
knowledge tonight,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of people think you know your rights. Only thing you know is you have the right to remain silent. That's all they ever tell you, but you don't know all your rights.
But they don't even really tell you that, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. How many of your clients have you ever had and they didn't know they were
There are
being
so many
violated?
people sitting in prison doing 25 to life because they didn't understand they had the right to remain silent.
The problem is you have to exercise your right to remain silent. I tell my clients all the time, you can never persuade a police officer to do anything he is otherwise inclined to do. You are not going to talk him out of arresting you if he is otherwise inclined to arrest you. So be quiet.
But we really don't.